Fear stops us from achieving our true greatness. Are you a professional woman who is feeling stuck, unmotivated, or burned out? Are you worried about your wellness? Are you letting fear stop you from crushing your goals? If you answered yes to any or all of these, then this is the podcast for you. Dr. Charmaine Gregory, night shift emergency physician, burnout thriver, and wellness champion, along with everyday heroes just like you, will explore how to face fear in our lives and emerge victoriously.
Hello, Fearless Freedom family. We have an amazing guest today. Dr. Anu Kathiresan is going to talk with us, and she's got lots of gems to share. Dr. Kathiresan, you want to introduce yourself to the Fearless Freedom Tribe?
Sure. My name is Anu Kathiresan, and I am a reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist. And I am in Houston, Texas. My practice that I work for is called Center of Reproductive Medicine.
Awesome. And so for those who are unaware of what Dr. Kathiresan does, I'm sure she probably can give a little bit of an elaboration. By the way, guys, this is a plug for her Facebook and her Instagram, which has amazing videos talking about reproductive health and what it means and what kinds of things we as women need to do. So definitely check that out.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about it. So as I said, I'm at Center of Reproductive Medicine. So at this practice, one of my roles is Director of Patient Education. And so I actually have some background in health literacy. I did some health literacy education back in med school. So what that is just trying to kind of teach basic health information in a simple form, clear form, using visual aids, things of that nature, so to help patients understand medical jargon, which can be overwhelming. So I have that background and kind of interest in patient education. And, I didn't really see a medium online for video education for fertility topics. And so fertility is my main specialty. So I wanted to try and deliver basic information on fertility topics related to essentially infertility, infertility workup, and infertility treatment. So I'm putting together a series of videos that goes over kind of an evolution of those topics. And you can find that on my Facebook or Instagram. And the handle is Anu Kathiresan MD. And it's also available on YouTube and will be available on my practice website shortly as well.
Awesome. And just so everybody's aware, we will have all this data in the show notes so that you can definitely reference that. And you should definitely check it out because I watched a couple of them and I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah, I kind of knew that, but that's great. It just really, she does a really good job, just really making it clear what she's trying to teach. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that because, we tend to, the more we train and the more knowledge we have, it's sometimes very difficult to kind of make it more understandable to the general public. And I think that speaks volumes. So thank you for doing that. So, we were talking the other day and we were talking about, well, why would someone need a reproductive specialist? And is it just when you've tried for a little bit, like 2 months and nothing's happened and then you get someone? What would be the reason why a woman would come to you?
Yeah, so great question. So first of all, you want to make sure that you're having normal cycles. So normal cycles is usually anywhere from 25 to 35 days. You want to make sure there's no known issue with the uterus, the tubal anatomy. So if you have a history of polyps or fibroids, that can affect fertility. If you have a history of multiple pelvic surgeries, pelvic infections, endometriosis, that can affect affect your tubes, if you have any known male factor. So if you have any of these known issues that are currently, a factor, then you definitely want to see an infertility specialist right away. Now, assuming none of those things are present, then a couple can potentially try to conceive on their own as long as the woman is under the age of 35 for a period of 1 year with regular unprotected intercourse. If the woman is over the age of 35, then they only really want to try for 6 months before seeing a fertility specialist. And then once you get above 40, the window kind of narrows in terms of, the time that you have to try. So it's actually better to see an infertility specialist sooner rather than later after the age of 40. And then if you're considering things like freezing your eggs, freezing your embryos, preserving your fertility, for those type of things, you can get seen right away.
Got it. So would you say that, we're professional women. We had a tremendous amount of time spent on education. And for both of us, it sounds like probably pretty much our entire 20s was dedicated to advancing our career and education. So, if you're a professional woman who's, say, currently working on a graduate degree or just got done with a graduate degree, and maybe your mid-20s, maybe upper 20s, would this be a good time to start thinking about your fertility, even if the infrastructure may not necessarily be there, but just kind of getting a feel for whether or not, you have any of these conditions that would make you be a candidate for seeing a specialist?
I would say if you're, thinking about fertility preservation, I think it would be reasonable to see a specialist in your late 20s, early 30s, in that age range. But if you're thinking about, just trying on your own and you're in that 20 range, as long as there's none of those known risk factors, you're having normal cycles, then, it would be reasonable to try for a year and then see somebody.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing, and I know that when we say, try for a year, are we talking about weekly? Like what is the frequency that people typically present with, and for you to really say that you've truly tried for a year?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So, the goal would be, like, let's say you have 28-day cycles, then you should theoretically ovulate 14 days prior to the end of the cycle. So if you have 28-day cycles, you should be ovulating around cycle day 14. Now, if you have 35-day cycles, then you would be ovulating around day 21. So, knowing the length of the cycle is important to kind of estimate where you would ovulate. And then wherever your ovulation mark is, the 6-day window prior to that is called the fertile window. And so, if you have a 28-day cycle, you'd want to start having intercourse like every other day, starting around cycle day 8, 10, 12, 14, and just kind of leading up to ovulation time. And sperm can live in the genital tract anywhere from 2 to 5 days. So having intercourse every other day should be sufficient to cover you. So that would be, kind of the best way, if you're not using ovulation predictor kits, to still, time things appropriately.
Awesome.
And if you are, I would say if you are using ovulation predictor kits, then I was going to say that, you would want to have intercourse the day of the surge, and then the next day. And, that's an okay way also to maximize your chances. Got it.
And of course, the key is to have fun. Like, don't get stressed. That definitely weighs on the situation.
Yeah, I know. Talking about the days and the times can actually, take the fun out of it. So whatever you can do to keep that fun in place is also good too.
Awesome. Cool. So I know that you have some incredible stories. Like, you have some great stories about the people's lives you have touched through your work. Is there anyone that you feel that you'd like to share with the audience?
So I would say I had a recent patient graduate from me, actually, like a few days ago. And I lived in another city prior to Houston, and she was actually a patient that saw me in that city. And she went through IVF, and she got 2 embryos, and we put one back in, and thankfully she conceived, and she had a beautiful baby boy. And then I moved to Houston, and she actually, still wanted to come see me, even though it was a 5-hour drive
Wow.
each way.
Nice.
10 hours, round trip. And the pressure was on because she only had 1 embryo left. And,
Right.
so, she made all her visits amazingly. I don't know how she did that. And, we put the embryo back in, and thankfully she got pregnant, and the pregnancy progressed beautifully. And so she just graduated from me a couple days ago. And and actually I didn't mention, but the first transfer when I was in the other city was actually my first embryo transfer ever. So
wow.
in fellowship, you do mock embryo transfers, but the majority of the time, they do mock transfers in fellowship, and then you end up doing your real ones when you actually start practicing. So she was my first one, and so special place in my heart for that baby.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that was an amazing gift of a patient to have done what they did. And so so very special to me.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that. So encouraging.
No problem.
Yeah. Because it's such it's a stressful thing. You're trying to have a family, you desire a family, and then you're having difficulty. You're not expecting, because it's kind of why I brought up the question about in your 20s, what do you do, or what kind of things should you look for? Because, in your 20s, you're kind of like, it's almost like an expected thing that you should be able to just try to get pregnant, and it happens right away.
Exactly.
And then you delay things, which, is happening for a lot of us because we are choosing education first, choosing careers first. So we're getting started later, and then you try and you're like, wait, nothing's happening. What's wrong? And it doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong with you. It just means that, perhaps you need a little bit of guidance, help from experts. So, and so it's so cool to hear those kind of victory stories, because I'm sure, and because this podcast is about fear, and I'm sure there's a lot of fear that and angst that goes into the whole process of, getting to the place where the possibility exists that you wouldn't be able to have a child, and then working towards having a child, and then ultimately having a child. So, thanks for everything you do. It's definitely awesome.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more about you. So I know that you have a pretty incredible story of your own, where you have faced fears, or faced several fears, and have overcome and emerged victoriously. Do you mind sharing one of those stories with us?
Sure. Yeah. So so kind of my story through medicine is I met my husband in medical school, and he was actually one of the first person I met moving into the dorms. And we were dating after 6 months after having met. And so we kind of dated throughout med school, and we had to match together. And so we weren't married at the time. So it was a little, not clear what we should do. And,
Right.
And so he decided to do neurosurgery, which was an early match at the time. So he was essentially going to decide where we would end up going, which I wasn't like super thrilled about.
Right.
It turns out, as it turns out, as we went through, our interviews and, traveling and everything, we would find that we like different programs, and different programs kind of fit us better. I knew I had an interest in infertility around then. So I was wanting to go to a program with an infertility fellowship. So he had his own version of his match list, and then I had my version of it. And I'm not sure exactly what he ended up submitting. Some probably hybrid of the two. But of course, he ended up where he wanted, which was he ended up in Florida. And so then I had to decide if I was going to follow him or not, because he matched a place that didn't have an infertility fellowship. And so, because residency is as stressful as it is, and other numerous reasons, I decided, okay, I'll follow him and try and make it work. And so I followed him, and I just tried really hard to look for research opportunities outside the department, and published as much as I could. And then I tried really hard to get the highest score I could on our yearly exams. And so then came the process of looking for a fellowship, and it turns out there was no fellowship in the state of Florida.
Oh my goodness.
I had to essentially leave him in order to do the fellowship. And I decided to interview all over the country because, it was a competitive match, and I didn't want to risk, not matching.
Right.
And so thankfully I matched, but then I ended up matching in California. So we were going to be now separated cross country, Florida and California. So I moved, and it was a difficult time. We were seeing each other every 4 to 6 weeks or so. But, I do say one of the positives of that experience was that it was kind of a rejuvenation of our relationship. I was missing him a lot, and vice versa. And so there was a little bit of good that came out of that, difficult time. But then I realized I was in an infertility fellowship, and I was 35, and I was surrounded by infertility.
Right.
I had, patients like you were saying, and were younger than me, and, going through infertility. I had my friends that were going through IVF. And, like you mentioned also, I was thinking about my mom, who, is different generation, but, she was 23 when she had me, and she was 28 when she had my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am 35, and I haven't done anything yet, or, thought about anything yet, because I'm so focused on career and getting to the fellowship I wanted and everything. So I, at that point, had decided, okay, I'm going to go through IVF and freeze embryos. But I did, have a little bit of a mental block about that if I hadn't tried to conceive. So it was going to be tough with him being cross country and, seeing each other every 6 weeks. But I was like, we'll just do our best for 6 months. And then after that, we'll fail. And then after that, we'll do the embryo freezing.
You had it all planned out.
I had it all planned. And then, I ended up actually conceiving. And so I was very, I felt very grateful that happened. But now I was in a scenario where I had to go through a pregnancy and be a single mom for 8 months alone and raise this baby. And here I am, this, new mom. I have no clue what I'm doing. So that was a difficult time as well. And my son was initially underweight, so I was really struggling with the breastfeeding, and I quickly transitioned to exclusively pumping, and then that just wasn't working. And then I just gave up completely around 3 or 4 months. And I was trying to get through my, my fellowship, write my thesis, and then we have to take a written board exam at the end of our fellowship. So I was trying to do all these things and balance, taking care of him on my own. And I did have a nanny and everything, but I didn't have many other resources there in California. Most of my family's on the East Coast. So, but I, looking back now, I'm appreciative of that time, because in some ways it showed me just what I could get through, and and how strong, you can be if you're, in these circumstances, and you just have to push through. And there was a light at the end of the tunnel in my case. I knew, we were going to end up, thankfully we're in the same city now. And,
Right.
But so I had that as my, okay, there's a light there at the end of this tunnel.
Right.
But I try and take the good out of the bad situations too. And so I feel like that was, a good experience in that sense.
Wow. Talk about grit. I mean, that's, to have all those things kind of come to a head at once and to surface, stronger is just amazing. So thank you for sharing that story. Oh my goodness. Across country from your hubby and in the middle of finishing up fellowship and boards and all that stuff and baby, that's a lot. That is definitely a lot. So how are things now? Is there anything that, so you had a huge fear that you were able to overcome, the fear of, can I do this on my own? And you emerged victoriously, showing that you were able to, and you did it well, even though in the middle of it, I'm sure it felt messy and like, things weren't going as planned, but you came out and you did great, and your little guy is awesome. And so, do you feel like at this point, do you feel like there's some fears that you're working on, that you're kind of working through?
Well, I would say, just kind of looking back at that experience, that there were some fears within them. And, one was, the fear of if I would make it in my fellowship with some of the, the setbacks that I had before even getting into, before even matching. And so that was one. And then, I think that when I was experiencing infertility around me, the fear of not conceiving, and that being a real fear. So I would, I would say those are kind of the fears I had through those experiences.
Awesome. And do you feel like there is a particular lesson that kind of comes together for you that you'd like to share with the audience about what it was? Because I mean, there's always something that that you can glean from that. I mean, you mentioned, you kind of alluded to some of it when you said that you didn't realize how strong you were until you were kind of out on the island on your own. Is there any advice you give to folks?
I just, when I was in that time, I guess I didn't really necessarily think about how difficult it was, because I was just thinking what I would need to do, day by day, what I needed to do to get, my thesis done, and, get the nanny to come in on the weekend to watch him so I could do that. And, at the time I didn't feel, I guess, like it was a struggle, because I just didn't have the time, I guess, to think about that. It was just a matter of
gotta get it done.
Exactly. And so just focusing on, having whatever goal in mind it was, and figuring out a way to complete it and then move on to the next thing, so yeah, in the time in the trenches, it was it wasn't necessarily the difficulty I'd focus on. It was just, how do I get the things I need to get done, and get them done.
Awesome. So it kind of sounds like what you're saying is, no matter how insurmountable the task may seem, once you look at where the end goal is and you break it down to incremental pieces, then those bite-sized pieces are more manageable, and it pushes you closer towards the goal. So you don't end up focusing on how difficult it is. Does that sound about right? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
No, that's a good pearl for sure. Awesome. So is there anything, so kind of looking back, do you feel like there's anything that you would have done differently from how the path went for you? Or would you just not change anything?
Yeah, I like to have the philosophy of not living with regret, so I think that every setback there was something to learn, something that made me stronger, something to push through, and it's okay that it wasn't necessarily the easiest route. Everybody's path is different and filled with different obstacles, and just what matters is making it to the end goal, and having that persistence, the hardworking kind of work ethic, and drive and motivation to keep going and figure out what you need to do to get your goals accomplished and do them.
Absolutely. No, that's a great gem. So are there any experiences that have taught you some valuable lessons with what you went through earlier?
Yeah, so I would say that when I was in infertility fellowship and just surrounded by infertility and fearful that I was actually maybe not going to have the opportunity to have kids because I had waited so long and put career first, I would say another thing I learned would be I could have, thought about those things earlier, considered freezing eggs or freezing embryos. And so, I would say to women out there that are in similar situations, fertility treatments, it's always good to seek treatment sooner rather than later. And so, if having a family and building your family is important to you, there are, treatments out there that can help. And I would definitely consider things like freezing your eggs or embryos to help make sure that you can still build a family later.
Nice. So having a little bit of foresight just in case.
Exactly.
Awesome. For sure. So, we have this, this conversation has been awesome, and I definitely am enjoying myself. Hopefully the audience is as well, because I know they are. But, we're gonna we talked about your fear, we talked about how you overcame your fears. You dropped some great points about, fertility and things that are pertinent to us as professional women. And and then of course, everybody's going to go check out all the educational material you have on social media, because we're going to make sure that's in the show notes, and we're going to make sure we keep plugging that. But now I would love for you to do what we do on every show, which is fill in the blank. All right. So the first fill in the blank is, to me, fearless freedom means.
So to me, fearless freedom means just having a goal in mind and just working as hard as you can to achieve them, and not letting fear stop you in the pursuit of those goals.
Nice. And then if I am fearless, I will.
You can accomplish anything.
That is so true. And then last but not least, my battle cry is.
My battle cry, I would say, is the philosophy of life is not defined by what happens to you, but rather how you react to what happens to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, because I know you're at the office, right?
Yeah, I'm at the office.
Yeah, I mean, she's working. She took time out of her busy day to chat with us, and we really appreciate that. And we are going to definitely hit you up on all your social media platforms and check out all the great stuff that you're putting out there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on this journey. Fear is all around us. It strives to stop us from achieving our greatness. We have the tools to be overcomers. By sharing our stories, supporting each other, and doing self-reflection, we can do this. If you found value in this conversation today, please be sure to subscribe to and share this podcast with your friends. By going to your favorite podcast platform, leaving a review and a 5-star rating, you will help to get the word out about it. And that is much appreciated. Thanks again for spending time with us. I appreciate your time and your attention. It is my hope that you will punch fear in the face today, and that you will be strong, be brave, and unleash your greatness.